Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of BMA Violet Hour. My name is Tracy Beal. I'm the manager of public programs here at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And let me wish you an early happy Halloween. Tonight, we are going to be talking witchcraft and women behaving badly. And if you haven't already guessed it, tonight's episode is inspired by the exhibition Women Behaving Badly 400 Years of Power and Protest. That's the exhibition that is on view currently at the museum. Leading tonight's talk is the curator of the exhibition. Her name is Dr. Andaleeb Banta. She's going to be the moderator for tonight's discussion, and she's going to be joined by three very spirited guests, and they're all going to talk about their own experiences and perspectives on witchcraft, what it means to behave badly, and so much more. So can we invite Dr. Andaleeb Banta onto the screen?
Hi, Tracy.
You're here.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. This is going to be exciting, everyone.
Yes, I'm very excited. This is the first time you're joining us on BMA Violet Hour, so thank you and welcome. I can't wait.
Yeah, well, here we go. Let's do it.
Yes. All right, I'm out of here. Have a good
All
one.
right, thanks. As you said, I am the curator of the exhibition Women Behaving Badly, 400 Years of Power and Protest. It's now on view at the Baltimore Museum of Art until December 19th. I welcome everyone watching to come see the show and see many of these fascinating works in person. Before I get into it, I'd like to thank Tracy and the BMA team, especially Sabina Diaz-Rimal and Andrea Boston, for your technical and organizational support. We could not do it without you. So tonight we have a fantastic panel of guests gathered together to talk about a theme that is explored a bit in Women Behaving Badly, and that is witches and witchcraft, and what that label means historically, socially, and in practice. But before we have what I think will be a very enjoyable and stimulated conversation about that topic, I thought I might take a few moments to share with the audience a brief overview of the contents of the exhibition to give a sense of the context for this topic and to provide a teaser of what is included in installation for those that may not have a chance to see it in person. So if we could have the first image, that would be great. Great. So this exhibition is devoted to women who have broken the rules throughout history, rules that generally were made by men and that are at the root of patriarchal society. In the history of Western art, these women have been vilified and trivialized in their presentation in visual art, often reduced to archetypes of as a sexual object or a dangerous entity. It is divided into various sections, the first half exploring images of women in the deep historical past, and then the second half following individual women's stories from 1800 forward. If we could have the next slide. One of the sections is of the historical heroines, the Greco-Roman and biblical imagery that informed later presentations from the 16th to the 19th century of women who transgressed, presenting them as the root of all evil or worthy of ridicule. The next slide, please. A topic we'll explore further tonight, witches and femme fatale, this idea that women who did not or would not conform to male-determined societal stricture were called out as witches or dangerous women, in fact, fatal women, as femme fatale means, something to be feared, something unhuman, and something that was dangerous and threatening traditional social roles. We will come back to this topic for tonight's conversation. Go ahead to the next slide. The second portion of the show looks at the changing social status of women in European and American society, the concept of the new woman, women becoming educated, starting to have more of a public presence, and pushing boundaries of what was considered in terms of acceptable dress and behavior. Next slide, please. And it also explores individual women who pursued professional public personas, either as dancers, actresses, singers, nightclub owners. Next slide, please. Or as authors, women who use their literary talents to speak to the unfair conditions that women and people of color experienced during this time period in history. And next slide, please. And then the last section is on the activists and the reformers, women who devoted their lives to attempting to improve social freedoms for women and those who were not included in largely white male-dominated society. That includes abolitionists, suffragists, dress reformers, abortion providers, temperance advocates, anti-lynching protesters, and many of the women that you see here, some of which are not really common knowledge. And so I hope this exhibition brings that forward for everyone to learn more about them if you don't already know. So with that overview, I'm going to turn to our panelists with us this evening. Great. Okay, so first I'm going to bring on to join us Hannah Segrave, an art historian and lecturer of Italian Studies at The Ohio State University. Hi, Hannah. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Excellent.
It's so great to be here.
Yay. And then Robin Morgan, poet, author, and social justice activist. There she is. Excellent. Thank you, Robin, for being here. And finally, Awo Faleyewa Harris, Priestess and Elder Mother. There she is with her fantastic headdress. Really great to have you here. We'll come back to your headdress because we all want to know more. So I thought I would start off with a few questions for each individual, and then we'll get into more of a group conversation, I think. So Hannah, I'll start with you. And I wonder if you could walk us through kind of the historical representation of witches in Western art.
Absolutely. And so thank you, Andaleeb, for bringing us all here. I know that we're all really excited to talk about this exciting topic. So the topic that I study as an art historian, and that is represented in this fantastic exhibition, which I just got to see last week. And I really encourage everyone to go see because the works are just literally intoxicating and spellbinding when you see them in person. But so these are images from the early modern witch hunts in Europe and America. And so just to get us all on the same kind of terminology, when I say early modern, I'm referring to the period from the 15th to the 18th centuries, and the witch hunts being this moment of inquisitorial activity across both the European and American continents that was focused on rooting out heresy in general, but also very specifically focusing on witchcraft and witches, those who were thought to get their power, magical powers, from contact with the devil, with Satan. And so this era peaked from the mid kind of 16th century until the mid 17th century, in large part thanks to the printing revolution, because this not only allowed the spread of texts and treatises written by demonologists, men who, always men, who studied witchcraft. And so these texts would describe what witches did and exactly why you needed to punish them. But at the same time, because of the technologies of printing, there were also artists who were making images that, if treatises said what witches did, then these images could give form to what witches looked like and what their practices looked like. And so these two ideas kind of went hand in hand, and both the texts and the theological juristic ideas went alongside, and both were shaped by the images that were created. So we could bring up a couple of those just to kind of briefly give people an idea of the kind of things that people were looking at during this time period. These are two really wonderful images that show that, even though the Jan van de Velde print that I believe is on the left of your screen, which has this wonderful young kind of seductress image stereotype of the witch, right? Surrounded by diabolical fury and a cauldron and a fire, that imagery we're all still familiar with because these archetypes are long, as well as this other idea of the witch as a kind of old hag trying to get younger women into her brood. In both of these images, we can see that, right, these two stereotypes. It's another form of the kind of what's called the Madonna whore complex, right? They're either young and beautiful, and so turning to witchcraft to ruin the world of men, or old and so jealous of youth and beauty, and so turning to witchcraft to ruin the world of men, emphasizing their diabolical, their demonic aspects, both in the environment in which they're enclosed or physically, particularly in the hag stereotype, kind of written, embodied into their physical representations.
Thank you. And it's also worth calling out that the image on the right, which is by Goya from the 18th century, doesn't overtly show a witch, but it uses that hag prototype to show the mistress of prostitutes who then use their beauty to beguile the men to their downfall. So yeah, it continues
Exactly.
even if it's not overtly witchcraft.
Right.
Exactly.
Precisely.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, and so that kind of follows into my next question, which is, going from that historical precedence that you were talking about the types of witches, the stereotypes of witches, how do we kind of approach the term of witch today? What does it mean to us today? How do we get from that historical point in the past to how the concept of witch applies to today's society? And Robin, I'm gonna kick that question to you if you'd like to share your insights on that.
Yeah, I think so, possibly. In the early days of the women's movement, because obviously we identified very much with the women behaving badly in the eyes of the patriarchy.
Right.
So congratulations on that exhibit. And thanks to the folks at the museum and to you, Andaleeb, and to Tracy Beal and all the folks who worked so hard to bring us together for this, and my sister panelists as well. Great headdress. We'll hear more about it. But there was a phrase that was published in the Malleus Maleficarum, the Witch's Hammer, which was a book published by two Dominican friars, inquisitors, Kramer and Springer, and the phrase is simply, "All rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft," which in women we know, of course, is epidemic. So what you had was this association of rebellion, which has come down to anybody who crossed the patriarchy was in big trouble. That means pretty much all women, men of color, anyone who had a mole or who could read or had a skin wart, or who could write, or who was a healer, or who could deliver a baby. I mean, it didn't matter, because if you were those were considered to be in rebellion. So you were on your way to the stake. And people don't fully, I guess, grasp that there were not one, not two, but three inquisitions. And the earliest started in 1233, which was the Papal Inquisition. And then its power became so enormous that it became the medieval Inquisition by 1542. And that Inquisition, its most famous gesture was to off Galileo, which was pretty stupid. But last came the Spanish Inquisition with its terrible auto de fe. And the Spanish Inquisition was formally abolished as late as 1834. People don't realize that when George Washington became president, Catholic Poland was in the middle of burning its last witch. This was 1793. So what you have is centuries of persecution, torture, just abominations committed, largely, not exclusively, but largely against women and girls. Famous case of a 13-year-old little girl who was made to dance in the ashes of her mother before she herself was burned. Men were also accused, but much more rarely. And it was a catch-22, because people went to picnics to watch the burning of a witch. People, and you got her coming and you got her going. You threw her into a lake, bound. If she sank, she was innocent. But if she survived, she was guilty and would be burned. So finally, since we had done a lot of guerrilla theater and kind of insouciant play on women and power and witches, finally I began to really do an in-depth study of this, and wrote a historical novel called The Burning Time, which was about a woman in Ireland, where the church came fairly late. It wasn't only the church; it was the Lutherans and Calvin and those folks as well. But it was primarily the church. And when they came into Ireland, they adopted and co-opted the previous goddess figures like Brigid as their saints. But Alice Kittler was a different case, because she was a woman of inherited wealth and her own independent wealth, and she had her own lands. So she fought back. And this is the one case we have, and we have trial records to show how Alice Kittler fought back. So I did the novel, and the interesting thing to me today is that now, all these years later, from our first demonstrations as witches, WITCH, Women's International Terrorist from Hell, you couldn't get away with saying that today. Put it that way. But the anagram was adoptable to many different uses. But younger women continually write me to my website and say, I want to join. How can I join? So it's apparently caught fire with the imaginations of women because it's has a certain audacity to it and humor, as well as militance. And that, I think, is reflected in your exhibition and in women behaving, thank the goddess, badly.
Keep going with it. Let's celebrate. Let's break the rules. That's what we're all about. It's fantastic.
Onto your brooms. Onto your brooms.
Onto our brooms, or whatever means of travel you have. So Awo Faleyewa, I'm wonderful to have you here. You are a practitioner of magical arts, and I wonder if you could give us an overview of your practice and perhaps give us a bit of a different perspective from the Western tradition that we've been discussing.
Absolutely. So my name is Awo Faleyewa. I'm an Iyalode. An Iyalode translates to chief mother. It's a chieftaincy title within the Iyaami, which I'm going to explain what the Iyaami is. So I am a Bruja, born a Bruja. My lineage comes from all the Brujas and the women in my family who are all witches. And so the practice looks like in Ifa is a bit different. So I'm going to share that with you now. Just let me just share my screen. Okay. And you can see, yes?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
It's the patriarch. It's the patriarch.
I needed to select the screen, actually.
There it is. Very good.
There we are. All right. So this is an overview of the sacred feminine divine practices of Ile Ofoshe Iyaami Oshorunga, which means the house where the power of the word and divine feminine astral healing is brought to the forefront. Okay. So to continue, oops, go back. And so what is Ifa? Ifa is an oracle collection of poetic and symbolic verses used to preserve the traditional wisdom, the knowledge, the science, our spiritual discipline, and healing techniques developed over thousands of years by our ancestors. In this practice, we use several different systems of divination. Dafa is one of the many, and is the oldest system of divination. Right here, you can see the Opong, which I'll explain later, and the Ikin, which is used for divination, which I'll explain in a moment. So throughout history, women have had a role in Ifa. We are not just the mothers. We are not just the caregivers. We actually are the ones that carry crowns as kings. We can be crowned as kings and queens. We wear our crown, and the women of the Iyaami are the keepers of the crown. If the women believe that the king, whether male or female, is abusing their power, the Iyaami, the Iyalodes, will refuse them, will not allow them to practice, and remove their crown. We are the regulators. And so therefore, throughout history, we, because of our power, have been deemed as witches and horrible witches. In our practice, we are told that we cannot, as women, womb holders, cannot do these rituals that you see here. This is an abori, which is a head cleansing ritual. We are told that we are not allowed to do initiations, that is left for the male practitioner, which is the babalao in Ifa. But actually, we can do it all. With our wombs, we transcend time and space because we carry the secrets to Orun, the spiritual realms, through our wombs. And when we use our power, when we activate our power, we are protesting and preserving our sacred power because we are told that we cannot do it. However, this is not new. This is new as far as men telling us that we cannot do the certain things within Ifa because, historically speaking, there's gender equity in Ifa. In Ifa, the system of checks and balances is intricate and multi-layered, but we, the women, the womb holders, give approval of which men and women will enter in Igbodu for Tefa, which is initiation, to elevate, to receive that. And historically, the British officially colonized Nigeria after a meeting of the Berlin Council of the International Affairs in 1912. This is when we started really embracing our power and protesting. I'm heading there now. And so during this time, the British colonized Nigeria for the purpose of economically exploiting the oil reserves in West Africa. Several hundred years earlier, the Jesuits who settled in Nigeria to lay foundation for the slave trade figured out how to corrupt the moral fabric of Yoruba land culture. They simply demonized the women for using the power of their womb and said that they were using their womb for harm. And they removed them from the dialogue related to ethics and commerce, because prior to this colonization, women were at the table having the discussions, clearing and moving obstacles so the village can thrive. And then when we moved on and we kept fighting and we were told that we were inherently evil and we were enslaved, eventually the women in the traditional Yoruba culture organized what is called the Gele, and they put a stop to the slave trade from Nigeria. The word Gele is from the Elysian Ge-ilede, meaning female power stands up. We rise up as Iyaami, as women of the Iyaami. Our rituals involve the women community publicly airing their grievances, protesting, healing the environment, gathering to create change. We are thought leaders. We are brujas who have mastered the gift and the practice of alchemy to create outcomes. And therefore, we have been told that we are evil. We provide radical healing, and we go out into nature and invoke Orisha for that healing. We go into possession in altered states to bring out the pain that has been brought upon us throughout our lives, throughout our genes, in our bloodline, and we release it and we heal it and we fill it with the light of Ela. We use herbs for healing, and we call it Ewe. Plant is medicine. And we invoke the power of the plant by saying, Ewe, Ewe, Lereo. Invoking the magic of the plant to bring healing. Because Ifa teaches that everything we need to heal and to elevate is provided for us on the earth. So the emergence of the Gele gave the British a heads up of the problem of the female power, saying that we were a problem. And so they dealt with this by making us a mystery, a crime, saying that the witches of Ifa were here to destroy, that we sucked blood, and that was the basis for calling our practice mumbo jumbo. But actually, in Yoruba, mumbo jumbo is a corruption of the words umbo juenbo, meaning when I return, I will eat. The origin of the Iyaami being inherently evil comes from the British, because the word Iyaami means my mothers. And in no way is my mother evil. The symbol of the Iyaami is found in the crowns of the Yoruba kings, the Obas. And nowhere on earth do kings put evil symbols on their crowns. It is the British imposition of Christian idea related to the belief that women are the source of evil in the world that is the basis for the idea that the Iyaami are evil. And when we are doing this work, we access portals. We are given our bird during our Iyaami Oshorunga ritual. We ingest the ashe of the bird, and the bird allows us to astral travel and connect with dimensional beings to see ourselves in the many dimensional beings that we are, as we are not just bodies of bones and muscle and tissue. We are beyond that. Iyaami Oshorunga Okamle Ruba Eliye is the bird master who travels beyond time and space, finding solutions to problems in the spiritual and earthly realms. And because we have had this power from the beginning of time, and it is a sacred power, it is a secret society, we are called evil. Because our mysteries are preserved in the featherless flight. because we can literally mark Odu, which are these markings you see here on the screen, and invoke our powers, invoke the spiritual realms, and fly through those portals, going into places you can't even imagine, and returning with wisdom, knowledge, and healing, and the solutions to the problem in the earthly realms. The problem is when we return with these solutions, we are silenced by man, because man doesn't want to hear the truth, and man cannot believe that a woman who gives birth to life, who can regulate the earth with the power of her vagina and her womb, can actually get this information so easily. We are born healers. We are born game changers. We shift, we heal, and we manifest. Our rituals involve using the earth, using the elements beyond our comprehension, going into possession of these consciousness to create the healing. This is a woman behaving badly, going into nature and challenging everything a man has ever taught us. Is us being bad, or is it us living in our fullest potential and our fullest power in Iponri, alignment of head and heart, and in Suru, in complete inner peace? Because once we are there, nothing can shift us out of our alignment. So with our power, we are birthing communities of healers, mediums, thought leaders. We bring change to the physical realms, the spiritual realms. We birth children. We take things away to create new. And through that, we are characterized as negative forces in witchcraft. But if we look deeply at the secret society of the Iyaami and what we are Aje Funfun, peace, clarity, balance, protection. Aje Pupo, creating abundance and passion. Aje Dudu, preserving mysteries, the protection and seeing the unseen. And all of these secrets, all of these deep, deep healing rituals are hidden deep within the Odu Ifa corpus, but only in the Yoruba text, because it was brought over into the US and translated and broken down, and the power of the Iyaami was removed. Why? Because we're witches and we behave badly. So when we look at our symbolic meaning and the divine feminine power that reigns throughout Ifa, look at the Opong, our divination tray. It is shaped as the womb. The symbols on it at the top represent Orunmila, the spirit of destiny. We have the snake, which represents our connection to the spiritual realms. We have the shell that represents the phallic symbol, the male principle, which is called the Iroke Ifa. We have the cowrie shell at the bottom that represents, again, the feminine principle, the vagina, the fish that represents abundance and the food in the forest, and our ancestors holding a baby at her breast. And in this Opong Ifa is where we invoke and we manifest, creating a portal for spirit to channel and connect to us. That is a womb, and that's called Odu. And the Odu is born, and that is the message, and Odu translates to what? Vagina. And all of our tools represent the power of the womb. We use the Iroke Ifa to tap into the Opong Ifa to represent sex, to represent manifestation and procreation. We tap to call in the Orisha Orunmila to create that balance. But again, we are the ones that hold the power. And therefore, because we hold this power, we are behaving badly. But guess what? We just women with power. And we're going to be here to change the world. I see.
Wow. Thank you. Really fantastic. Really excellent. That gave a whole other perspective to the historical traditions we were talking about. And it's exciting to know that it's still alive and well, and it hasn't been squashed, and it continues because the women continue. I wonder if you could briefly tell us about your headdress.
Yes, so this is called a Gele. And a Gele is made of a cloth called Ashe Oke, which is a top cloth or the highest material that you can find in your Yoruba land. And it represents social status. So with the one I'm wearing today, I'm Elder Mother Iyalode. So you will see it nice and big and round, and it ties in the back, which represents sunset and my elder status. When you see it tied to the right, you will notice that the woman is married. Tied to the left, she's single. Tied to the front is sunrise. She is youth. So if I were to enter into a traditional Yoruba event, this would give a signal that one, I'm married and I'm an elder. So you will know how to address me, or don't address me at all.
No, it's fantastic. And I love how it connects to the different astrological forms and the natural. So that kind of leads into one of the questions I thought we could talk about. And then if we'll take some questions from the public, the audience after that, which I see a couple popping up. So the question I have is a very general one, and it's more about kind of an observation about the connection of women to nature and this through line of women and witches being something that has maybe an abnormal or unusual connection to nature that perhaps your non-witch person does not have. And I wondered if you wanted to speak, any of you wanted to speak to how that relates to your understanding of the portrayal or practice of witchcraft.
I'll take it.
Yeah, go for it.
So as far as our practice and I'm going to use the Iyaami because that is my house. The Iyaami initiates and nature. We go into astral travel every full moon. We have a sacred practice that we do. We don't have to be in each other's presence. We can do it virtually. We don't need to see each other on Zoom or anything because we meet in the astral realms. So during the full moon, we invoke Era, which is the light of consciousness. We mark Odu on our Okon to open the portal. We invoke the Iyaami with Irete Meji, bringing them down into Aye, which is the earthly realms. And from there, we go into trance, altered state, and we leave our bodies. We leave our bodies with the ashe, or the spirit of our bird that is given to us during our initiation. The secrets of that I won't give away. But we receive that, and that's how we're able to fly. Through that, we're able to go through time and space. We can go future, back, present, whatever it is. We also go into nature to get healing. Ifa teaches that one can receive all of their healing when they go into nature in pure silence. So during our initiations, we prepare by doing a head elevation, fasting, and going into nature in silence for as long as you possibly can to receive the healing and the guidance. And while we're there, we connect with nature, with the herbs. Once we receive the Orisha Osanyin, which is the Orisha, the consciousness of herbal medicine and healing using the earth. Once you receive that, you can literally take a leaf. I can take my plant and pinch the leaf and hear and feel what my plant needs, but also what that plant can do for me. And that's a natural innate ability that once you're trained, it never goes away. And so a witch is in alignment with nature, alignment with their power, with their head and their heart. They're very, very clear and able to channel and connect with animals, with herbs, with the ocean, with the water, going to the water to give ebo and do ritual for Yemaya or Olokun at the ocean. If anyone who has done it can go there, and the minute you say Iba she Yemaya, the ocean starts going wild and clapping and responding in real time. Go to the ocean and invoke Chango and watch a thundercloud with one strike of lightning just coming past you. Happens all the time, especially if you're on sacred land.
You know, there's a real pattern to this, Awa. Recently on my podcast, I had as guests powerful women leaders from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is what remains of the 6 tribes who created this extraordinary thing on which the United States Constitution was based. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, Washington, all knew the Haudenosaunee, all learned from them and built their Constitution not on the models in Europe, but on these so-called savages. Very interesting. But the one thing they left out, well, they left out 2 things. One was women. Oops. Another, of course, was the treatment of people that they had abducted from Africa. There was slavery. But in addition, they left out a third thing, which is the concept that any decision that you make, whether it is in a personal relationship, whether it's political, whether it affects the whole people, whatever, has to be thought of before you make the decision in terms of its impact 7 generations into the future. And that is extraordinary when you think about what's happening with global warming, because if we'd followed that one, we wouldn't be in the precarious position we're in right now.
Exactly. And that connection to nature, the ability of witches to connect to nature was kind of always one of the things that was greatly feared, right, by this male society, even in the early modern period. And so some of these early images, I think, of the famous painting by Hans Baldung of showing the weather witches, naked, connecting to and able to manipulate the weather, right? As we know, that is something that society has thought we don't have control over. And so this ability of women and witches to connect to nature, to tap into that power, right? To tap into the powers denied to people who are not the elevated chosen ones in
But it doesn't have to be elevated and chosen, because it's very grounded. It's very pragmatic in a sense.
Oh, yeah.
2 themes, sexuality and the natural world, you always find them intertwined in witch persecutions and in women coming to power. So
exactly,
it's a lesson. You know that, yeah.
So one of the questions we have from our audience here is actually about snakes. That snakes seem to be a common through line in a lot of cultures in the representation of witchcraft. So let's talk about snakes. What do you want to say?
Snakes are a phallic symbol, but they are also, because they are hidden and because the clitoris, remember the clitoris, was very, very important. Exactly. Was very, very important in the iconography. The great Lamia, Lamia goddess, the one who has a tiered skirt and bared breasts, and she's holding a snake in her left hand and a snake in her right hand. She was the cover, in fact, of my very first book of poems. And the Lamia is one of the faces of the goddess. So you have the snake, you have the bull, or the bull dancers in Crete. You have the cat, most certainly. You see that particularly in Egypt. These are images that are not like the ones that we saw before, because these are power images. These are women in goddess roles and in goddess presentations, like Awo was saying, where we emanate our own selfhood, our own sexuality, our own power, our own intelligence, and our own working with the environment. So it's not the victim aspect of it at all. I wanted to ask both Hannah and Awa, though, since time and again what we see are women using this power, whether it's in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy or in Awa's faith system, and then having to convince men who said, oh, this is a bad power, it's not a good power, and want to take it away or downplay it. It's backlash, basically, in political terms. So what do we do at that junction? What do we do at that junction? Any thoughts?
So I can only speak from Yoruba practice and my lineage. So the snake represents the spirit of destiny, especially the rainbow snake or the rainbow serpent. It represents Orunmila, which is the Orisha of destiny. Also, the snake represents the messenger from the spiritual realms and the one that continues to rebirth itself in the Ouroboros. So all of that is based also in Ifa. So as far as men in Ifa and the use of snakes, before colonization, there was no issue with men and women using the snakes. Mm-hmm. We both use the snakes. We have them, we keep them as mediums, as healers, as cleansers, diviners. They are a part of us, just like we keep birds. I keep cats. I have 7 cats. They're all different mediums for different things. And so the snake is a sacred symbol and was turned into something dark and demonic when it was brought over here. And so convincing men that, using a snake here in the United States, it's been sexified. Everything turns into a sexual thing, when actually, no, my snake is going to literally hold my snake, and my snake is going to tell me everything I need to know about it.
Yeah.
I think you touched on something so right there, which is this idea of coming, these symbols of power and of manifestation and healing came into contact with a society or men who didn't understand it. And so then they demonized it, right? And you saw this, and that is so much about what happened with the witch hunts in Europe, is you had, exactly like Robin was saying at the beginning, you had midwives and healers and sex workers and people who were a part of pagan traditions, ideas and communities that had existed for, hundreds of years, all of a sudden, through this contact with this codification of demonology and witchcraft through the Inquisition, became diabolical, became demonic. And so I think in one way,
but still is, and it's not even
exactly, and still is.
It's a matter of any woman who showed spirit, sexuality, herself, her true self. That was and it has consistently been the slap down again, and you see it in fundamentalism now in this country. You see it in the Texas abortion laws. Woman can't control her own. So you see it, the same pattern again and again. Whenever women rise up and say, "Wait, just a minute here, boys," you see that repetition.
We're told that we're dirty when we menstruate, and that is also something that was brought here. It wasn't a practice back in Yoruba land. Here, we're told that when we are menstruating, we can't touch an altar, we can't invoke, when actually our menstrual cycle is the source of our power.
So what do? You say to them, you explain to the men, you educate them, you say, this was not the original way. This came in with the colonizer.
Exactly. I explain that to them, but also tell them it's taboo for an Ifa, for a man to get involved in woman's business.
Well, that's
like I should not be involved in a man's business. I can't tell a man how to be a man, and a man can't tell a woman how to be a woman.
Certainly not.
When a man is being nosy and trying to get intel into what the Iyaami does, because the Iyaami, we do not initiate men. If a man is called into the Iyaami, he must receive an Odu pot that has the womb of his dead grandmother.
Wow.
And because we can't get our dead grandmother's wombs anymore, it has to be the female goat womb. And that's the only way he can access that. And he has to go through initiation. And that's just so he can understand the pain of a woman and be cloaked in the energy of a woman to astral travel with us.
Do they get
that? They know nothing.
Get it? Do you think they get it?
Some do. Some are born knowing the Iyaami and astral traveling, and I have been blessed to know very, very few, but the majority want to take that control away, want to tell us that we are less than, that it is demonic of us to access that information, that we're wrong for using our menstrual cycle, that power to travel, to heal, to connect. And it's not blood magic. It's not the trendy putting period blood in the spaghetti. That's taboo also and disgusting. There's different ways that we use our blood during that time, but it's never a blood sacrifice or anything like that.
That's all.
So, actually, speaking about blood, someone had a question about these negative characteristics of witches, how they're often caught up, historically speaking, in anti-Semitic tropes, but also the practice of drinking blood. Vampires and witches were said to eat children.
So vampire, I want to stop right there. Vampire is not a blood-sucking person. Vampire translates to medium. So when you're in the presence of a psychic medium, when you're in my presence, after you're done with me, you're going to be rejuvenated, but you're going to be exhausted and dehydrated because I pull energy off of you. I'm not interested in sucking your blood. The idea of drinking someone's blood came here. That was all here. My Baba, who initiated me, is Transylvanian and Egyptian. And he has a lineage of vampires. His parents were. And none of them sucked necks and drank blood And it also is to demonize us again. We don't sit and drink blood. When we give ebo offering, we give offering of food, adimu, that we cook. If there's an animal offering, that offering of the animal is to feed everyone in the village.
Mhm.
That's what that's for. We don't just start slicing and dicing and throw carcasses. It's to feed everyone.
I like the gesture.
That's a really interesting image. Okay.
Throw a goat over your shoulder.
Very Henry VIII is like, take a chicken leg and then
Yeah, just throw it over. No, every part of the ritual is sacred, but no, there's no blood drinking. All of that was made to demonize us, and the fact that we bleed every month, they think that we're out here throwing our menstrual blood all over people to control them, and that's
Well, it's also interesting to me because it's a reversal. It's sort of the thing that Donald Trump always used to do, to be perfectly frank. He used to accuse others of doing what he himself had already done. And what it is, where does body and blood get eaten and drunk? Where?
Christianity.
Is it the
Yeah,
Catholic
Jesus
Mass?
Christ.
Catholic Church.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, where do we begin looking for drinking blood? Something that symbolizes blood, or actually is a metaphor for actual blood in the Mass and the body. When in fact, in real life, it's the woman's body, if she's nursing, if she chooses to nurse, which is the food for a baby, for a child. It couldn't be more positive. So it's all turned upside down and inside out.
Exactly, and this was, very specifically used by both, image makers and demonologists in the 15th and 16th and 17th centuries, right? Because the only people who had more papal bulls, so that is the laws coming directly from the Pope out to target them, it was Jews and it was witches, and they were very specifically entwined together, right? Because of these very anti-Semitic ideas about Jewish rituals as cannibalistic. And so then, of course, you start seeing images of witches as devouring children and devouring each other, and drinking blood and sacrificing babies, and given often very anti-Semitic features in these images as a specific way to tie them together and to, justify hunting them by the thousands. And so that's absolutely such a right point to pick out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, changing gears a little bit. This is a question specifically for Robin. Why did WITCH, Witch, disband? And do you feel that it needs to be revived for the times that we are living in?
The answer is yes to both. I mean, it never disbanded because it never was an organized thing. I mean, we when we started it, we just basically said, if you are rebellious, I had a little paragraph that I had written up, which was like, sort of, if you're rebellious, if you're against the patriarchy, if you stand for women's power and women's sensibility, and blah, 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 turn around 3 times and say it, you're a witch. So there were all of these college kids and neighborhood kids and kids who couldn't go to college who really glommed onto that image because it had spirit. And they began to demonstrate against it. There was a wildcat strike in upstate New York of telephone company workers, and they were women incensed at telephone company harassment, WITCH. There were women in Chicago who demonstrated against the transit authority because they raised prices, and that was somehow women irritated at transit, something to a CH. So it never disbanded. It was something that anyone could join. It did not have the discipline and the specificity that Awa speaks of in her faith system. But it wasn't intended to. It wasn't meant as disrespect, but it wasn't intended. It was meant as an organizing tactic. And for the joy and the insouciance that we were feeling in the 60s and the early 70s, to be communicated that it wasn't a dreary thing. The men were doing a lot of violent stuff at that point. This is the beginning of Weather People and all that sort of thing. And we wanted something that was affirmative and positive, and people picked up on that. And so now it's not just disbanding, but rebanding all over again. And there are witch covens of 13 women each springing up all over Europe, some in China, my God, in China, and all across the States. So, my money's on them.
I love that, this idea that, right, that it's not just a specific organization that you have to join, but it's a birthright. It is radical community and sorority and solidarity, and you claim it. It's a thing that you just claim.
That's right. There's nothing to say that you can't be Awa in her faith system and also in WITCH, in which, because it's not at all exclusionary. On the contrary, it's just like, come on in. You know,
right. Ifa teaches that you have free will to be whatever you want, whoever you want, to love and live freely. Just be a good person, an Iwa Pele of kind and gentle character, and never ever to weaponize your power, because that is taboo.
Isn't it interesting how ours is always about come on in, have a cup of tea, or whatever, and the guys seem to be in wait, your skin is a different color, you're a different size, you're a different shape, you're a different gender, you're not a different, threatening, saber rattling, horror.
And that's why, and you know, because of that,
not all guys.
When I was given by Orunmila to birth my Ile, which is my house, Ile Ofoshe Iyaami Oshorunga, I cannot allow men into my Ile. We are an exclusive Ile of womb holders, and that's specifically for protection and preserving the sacred society, the sacred secret society of the Iyaami. Because when I did have a man here who came to get healing, was gathering intel, and immediately my godchildren went into possession of their ancestors. And what happened? The manifestation of the Egum came into the room, and he got thrown out of the room.
Oh, that's very good. I think we should borrow.
And having conversations with men around the exclusivity of my Ile in particular, which is an Iyaami Ile, which is not a common thing in the US, they're immediately threatened and start to question and want to pry or even try to challenge me. And what happens is the Iyaami shows up and they possess me, they go through me, and what happens? It's a shutdown, it's a cut. And it's like, don't play. And the reason why we're exclusive is for protection. And they're like, well, exclusivity, you know, equates to racism. And I said, from your experience and your perspective, but as a woman of color, as a woman with a child, and a woman who is here as a healer, I need to protect myself. Therefore, exclusivity is about protection and elevation.
Absolutely. Now that makes perfect sense. That's not what I'm talking about. But you have the right. Any woman has the right to join anything else that she wants. You can breathe. There's space. It's open.
So we have another question, and we have about 7 minutes. So the question here is, can you speak to the connection between early modern Quaker women and the iconography of witches in Western art?
Well, the Salem and Danvers, those communities, were not based in original old ancient goddess worship. There was Tituba, who was the one black woman, and who was an enslaved person
that we know of.
That we know of, but at this point,
historical record is a problem.
Well, you think? Oh, you think?
Great problem with these guys.
Considering who wrote it, they made it quite a problem. But they were just, many of them were good Christian women, good in quotes Christian in quotes women. Rebecca Nurse, many of them were serious, devout Christians. That didn't stop the atrocities that were committed against them. For one thing, you have to understand, both in Europe and in the United States, this was a similarity. When you accused someone of the craft, you got their land. What a thought. Ha, ha, ha. What an incentive. My God, that's just appalling. So people accused all the time. And these women were older women. They were housewives. They were farmers. They were, they were not goddess worshippers. They were not into Iyaami. They were not into the goddess worship of some of the European early witches had been actually practiced. They were not into any. They weren't even in some cases herbalists. They were just good Christian women, but they were crushed to death with stones and hanged anyway. So this is not based in reality. This is not based in anything sensible or that makes sense. This is
Logical. Yeah.
Hatred, misogyny, and hatred.
Well, and I think back to the original question about Quaker women and witches. I don't know of an exact equivalent. However, there is an image in the exhibition in Women Behaving Badly that shows. It's a very complicated and extremely racist and sexist image, but it shows a overly caricaturized, racist characterized Black man dressed as a Quaker, waving the banner of votes for women coming from England. And so there is this equation of Quaker women, of course, with the suffrage movement, with abolition. And so I think, and so, if you're against those things, it's not a short leap to then vilify the Quaker women as equivalent to witches.
Yeah, the fact that Tituba existed became the excuse for these girls to claim in their states of hysteria that this was proof of demonic possession.
Yeah.
So it's but you got to fight back.
Well, and part of the way to fight back is to educate yourself, for sure. And so actually we have a question, and I see that Awo Faleyewa, thank you for answering. Someone asked, are there any books that guests could recommend on this topic? Now, this topic, we've covered like a million topics, I feel like. So if there are any historical books, or I know, Robin, you've written historical literature that you want to recommend to the audience.
It's The Burning Time, and it's a novel. So it reads like horses and torches and galloping and things, and powerful women, by God. Yeah. So that would be my contribution this time around. It's digitalized as well as a hardcover book, softcover book.
The books that I recommend are Egun, E-G-U-N, by Awo Faleyewa Iwa Pele, which is Kind and Gentle Character, Iwapele, which is also by Awo Faleyewa. Also, my book comes out, Gathering Bones, A Journey Through Ancestral Healing, comes out in December. And for further learning and motivation and guidance through this journey and learning about Ifa and your ancestral reverence, you can always listen to my morning show, Coffee and Toast, which is on RIP Radio Network, where I divine before I go on the show, and spirit works through me, and I'm in full possession, and I bring you your motivation and your guidance directly from Orisha and your ancestor every morning, Monday through Thursday at 7 a.m. And you can always download the app, so you can do it at any time. You can listen at any time, but there's a lot of guidance there, and I also drop a lot of knowledge and literature for you to do further research.
Yeah, and for those interested in looking back into the historical record, particularly from the European context, there are some really wonderful books on the witch hunts of early modern Europe, both kind of broadly and specifically about gender, by historians like Brian Levick and Alison Rowlands. But there's also lots of great books by art historians and exhibitions, particularly anything that Charles Zika writes, as well as this wonderful exhibition that only happened a couple years ago that was curated by an artist, Diana Petherbridge, called Witches and Wicked Bodies, right? So very much in the spirit of Andaleeb's exhibition, richly illustrated, and you can kind of see how these archetypes start and change and evolve and still persist today.
Wow.
Do you know that Halloween has become the most celebrated holiday in this country?
I love it.
Interesting.
I think we're coming back to those pagan origins.
Many people, do the parade and it's trick-or-treating and it's a lot of superficial, cute stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's something in an archetypal sense of its coming back with this kind of power that is quite extraordinary, I think.
And I think that goes right back to answering one of the questions you posed to us, Robin. How can we I think that's it. It's the reclaiming, right, of these things that were demonized, and just reclaiming them
They
into,
started pure, and then they got demonized, and
and
now
we just take them back.
For decades, we had to practice Ifa, Santeria, and Lukumi, which is all in my lineage, in basements, underground, hidden. When we walked outside in our whites after initiation with blood droplets on us and feathers stuck to us and our alekis covered, down our necks, we were demonized on the street. We were looked down upon. I remember going from my godmother's house after ritual, covered with blood splatter, and I had my Eglin stick and my head wrap, and I'm on the New York City bus on my way home with my daughter. And
you got courage, girl.
And I don't care. I'm gonna do what I gotta do. This is my power. And so
That's right.
the whole way. Until this day, I'm ridiculed. I'm told, because of the tone of my skin, I was told I wasn't black enough to be an Iyalode because of my lineage. Walking in the street, hiding who we are is no longer a thing. That's why we're rising up. That's why so many of us are coming out and moving away from Christianity, because we're finding and reclaiming our power that's in our bones. Because Egun, ancestors, translates to bones. It's already in us. And now we are coming out, and we are out. We're not coming out, we are out. And now the work is to bring harmony to the earth, to restore. And through that has to be destruction, has to be the natural disasters. Iyaami destroys. We take away, that's the contraction. That's Oyeku Meji, the contraction, to destroy in order to recoup, rebuild, reclaim, boom. You're reborn. And now you just change the harmony of the entire universe because of the power of a woman.
Listen, the power of a woman, I am so for that. You got me. Thank you, Adelita, and thank you, dear museum, and thank you, Hannah and Awa, and all you great folks and Tracy Beal, who organized the exhibition, and you curated it. Thank you so much. It was really a very, very interesting and fruitful and good discussion. So
it was great. It was great to connect. Thank you so very much.
On the astral plane, we'll take our brooms and just be more.
We'll meet there.
I'll see you with my bird. But It was a pleasure to be here. It was an honor to be here to share the knowledge of Ifa and the Iyaami, and to be a part of the BMA, and to bring Ifa to the BMA. So it's an honor. I want to thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting all of you, and thank you to Tracy for being awesome and just amazing all the time.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you, Hannah, Robin, and Awo Faleyewa. All right, carry on.
Thank you.
Onward.
I had my camera off. I forgot that I was working. I was just, I'm like, I've got to come on and say.
Are we still live?
I gotta come on and end the program, but I don't even.
Are we still live, Tracy?
We're still live.
We're still here.
We're still here.
The after party now.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, I didn't have my camera and my sound on, but usually I come on to end the program. You guys did a wonderful job. I mean, I forgot I was working. This was absolutely beautiful. Like Awo Faleyewa, Andaleeb, Hannah, Robin, thank you all so much for joining us.
This was absolutely so much fun.
It was better than we anticipated. I was like, this should have been an hour and a half program. Let's go.
or longer, or a millennium.
This is wonderful. So thank you so much. And for all the folks that are watching, the program is recorded just in case you missed part of it. Our next BMA Violet Hour program is going to be in person at the Baltimore Museum of Art on November 4th. We are celebrating the Juan Grieve exhibition. So come and join us at 6 p.m. You can find that on the Baltimore Museum of Art website. But yes, have a wonderful evening, and until we meet again.